12 Roses for Love. Class Reunion. How can Jake, of all people, not have a digital presence? Anita muttered to herself as once again she keyed in his name. This time, just the initial and his surname, Mackenzie. Not one of the suggestions that came up fitted his profile. She had work to do and logged off. Being the general dog's body at this fast diminishing entity, a bookstore, meant that she had to be at the counter, serve, clean, arrange books, recommend some, take cash, the whole shebang. It was a lovely June day in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and Anita itched to be outdoors. The bell at the door rang as someone walked in. Gina, her best friend since school and the only one who remained in touch 10 years later. "Hi, how are you doing? Will we see you at the class reunion?" Gina never asked, she demanded. Anita loved her red-headed, freckle-faced friend who hadn't changed even after graduating as a physiotherapist and finally bringing in the big bucks at a walking clinic on Spring Garden Road. "I don't know. Mum has good days and bad days. If she's asleep, I'll cycle down." Gina rolled her eyes, gave her a hug, and shouted over her shoulder, "Be there. You are our class beauty. Everyone will want to see how you are." Looking like this, Anita raised her arms, painfully aware of the added weight that had, as far as she could tell, taken her once slim waist to beluga whale proportions. "You are not fat." Gina turned around and gave her a hard look. "We've all got a couple of inches." "Tell them all. I'll be there in spirit." Was it really only 10 years ago that they had run out of those doors, screaming, grad gowns and caps streaming in the wind? Tears of joy as they welcomed the day they thought would never come. School's over, freedom, that emotion as fickle as a Nova Scotia summer day, had flung off the chains of routine, homework, waking up at what felt like crack of dawn to get to school on time. Then reality. Halfway through her first term to become a paralegal at the NSCC, her dad's first and last heart attack. Then Mum's depression that the doctors said would pass but hadn't really. Anita was left to handle everything. The only blessing in all of this was Dad's end of service payouts had paid out the mortgage. Today, those chains of routine at school seemed like a garland of carefree daisies. Why did they have to end? The aunts and uncles, even friends her age, kept saying, "Don't look back. You have to move on." Move on to where? After her father died, Anita had pushed the memory of Jake away. They'd never really dated. There wasn't even a clear declaration of interest. He was one of her group of friends, and that was as far as the connection went. When they hung out over the weekends or holidays, he only joined them a few times. The joke was that his head was floating in a math equation. He'd only grin and come up with his stock response, "Math is everywhere. Look at us. 5. See a number? A prime number." Jake hadn't come to the funeral, as he'd already left for Montreal. The first time he returned to Halifax, he came to see her. "Sorry about your loss, Anita," he'd mumbled on the doorstep, fiddling with his watch strap. He came in for a cup of tea, but didn't stay long. After he left, she read the little note he'd quietly left for her, almost hidden under the sugar pot. "You were always very special. I couldn't believe that the class beauty included me in her group of friends. Don't change. Stay brave. Reunion night was a Friday, and Anita's heart thumped. Should I go, Mum? She asked aloud, not really expecting a response. Mum just sat in her chair rocking. Then, out of the blue, go where? Mum asked. For the first time in 9 years, comprehension registering behind her otherwise often blank stare. It was brief. She went back to rocking and staring at the TV. Anita's heart slowed to a crawl. She helped her mother to her bed and sat down to read her book. One advantage of working at a bookstore, she was the Our Staff Recommends. But Anita couldn't concentrate on the book. She got up, went to the door, turned the handle, then sat down again. She checked on her mother, fast asleep, thank heaven. I'll just stay in the shadow of the big tree in front of the school entrance and perhaps get a glimpse of some of them. The person she hoped to see she daren't think of. She brushed her hair. It was still thick, dark and wavy, and now it reached her waist. She fastened it into a beret and put on a lick of lipstick, scraped the bottom of the old cake of blush and managed to add a bit of colour to her cheeks. Just in case, she said, staring at herself in the mirror. Her skin was still smooth and pale and her eyes wide, nut brown and large. Her face had become plump with her careless diet. They won't recognize me anyway, she grimaced. How fat I've grown. She pinched the roll around her waist. I need that exercise. She wheeled out her bicycle and praying that Mum would sleep through the night, she pedalled at a steady pace from her Creighton Street home to the old school. Years of covering this stretch flashed through her mind. She hadn't come this way since the day she graduated. Now she found herself smiling as she remembered. Maynard. This was where Chuck would join her, and there at Bower, her dearest friend Gina would seamlessly slip into the group on her bicycle. Next, on the corner of North Park, 2 more friends, Natasha, their studious one with long dark hair, long face and glasses, and Jake, their brilliant, nerdy friend, the old famous 5. St. Pat's, her heart missed a beat, but it was a happy sensation. In spite of a slight chill in the air, a warm sense of comfort settled around her. She drew the bike into the shadow of the big pine that stood majestically at the entrance. It would hide her from view as they left, she thought. She could hear the sounds, the old familiar songs, Madonna of course, and Shania Twain, Michael Jackson. Her feet twitched. If she were in there, she'd be dancing up a storm. Or would she? She looked at her stomach and resolved to do something about it. I'd be thumping like a baby elephant. She smiled to herself. A touch of bitterness turned her lips down. I'm here and feeling good. That's all that matters, and with them in spirit, as promised. Oh, Jake. She said out loud, why did I never say anything to you? Like what? A voice said from behind her. She turned around, her skin prickling. Jake? He stood there grinning. Anita giggled. Where the hell have you been? I've been looking for you, searching the internet. Nothing. He yanked at his watch strap. Around, he whispered. I wanted to check if you were here. I didn't think you'd be hiding outside. I can't go in like this. Like what? Fat? God, Anita, you are still the most beautiful girl I've ever known. Have you known many then? Anita's laugh was low and conspiratorial as Jake continued to talk in hushed, whispered tones. He reached out and took her hands in his. I've always only loved you. His voice was soft, with emotion now. Anita reached forward to kiss him. He drew her in. Their kisses spoke of sorrow, unexpressed love and longing. When they finally pulled apart, she said, "That's what I wished I'd said. Shall we go in?" "I can't. The reason you don't find a digital presence for me is that I work for the government, and all I can say is it's classified. I know I can trust you to keep a secret. Don't tell anyone and don't mention that you saw me. I will come and see you when I can. Do you understand?" "Jake, you're frightening me." "Don't be afraid. Is what you do dangerous? Are you a spy?" "Don't ask questions, please." That sounded like the old hesitant Jake. "I just want to know how you are managing." "We're okay." She took a deep breath. "Things are a bit difficult, but Mum is still able to do her data entry job, and my work at the bookshop has its advantages. It's close to home. I don't need to run a car. Why do you ask?" "I just wondered," he said. "I have to go now. They'll be coming out soon." He dashed across to the far side of the building on Windsor Street, where as she watched, Jake climbed into a low-slung, very fancy-looking car and slid away. The sound of the door opening startled Anita. She backed deeper into the tree and hedgerow. One group spilled noisily out. She couldn't help but smile, although her heart was thumping. Jake, it was Jake, seemed unreal. Had she really seen and heard all that he'd said? Or was her overactive imagination messing with her head? Once they'd gone, she pushed her bike back onto Quinpool Road and pedalled furiously all the way home. She couldn't sleep. Was that a dream, or was it real? She was sure it was as real as her hand in front of her face. She woke up with a king-size headache. It lasted throughout the weekend. Tylenol only did a bit to ease the throbbing. Her head was still pounding like a sledgehammer on Monday morning. For the first time since she started work, she called in sick. On the bright side, Mum was having a good spell. She'd woken up, had breakfast and gone to work, all without any prodding and encouragement. Anita took 2 Tylenol, turned over and slept like she hadn't done for years. Jake loved her. That's all she needed to know. Tuesday, Anita was well enough to go to work. She felt rejuvenated and excited. Perhaps now he'd get in touch. At 12:30, when the doorbell rang, it was Gina who walked through the door. "Why didn't you come?" she demanded. "We all kept hoping you'd come. I could have picked you up." Before Anita could say anything, Gina came and hugged her. "There's some sad news, though, about Jake." "Jake? What about him?" It was on the tip of her tongue to say she'd met him, before she recalled he'd asked her for secrecy. Apparently he died 3 years ago. No one knows where or how, but Alex, who also went to McGill, says there was a small obituary in their alumni newsletter. Anita went white and cold all over. No. She almost screamed. "That's not true." "Say it's not true," she hastily added, once again nearly letting Jake's secret slip out. Why the hell didn't he tell her he was supposed to be dead? Gina held her hand for a long moment. I know you liked him, but it's been many years. He was part of us, Anita whispered. Yes, he was. Gina looked somber. School's really over now, Anita said. I guess it's time to say goodbye to all that. The two friends held hands for several moments longer. Each one plunged into memories of their old school years. It was 2009. The new millennium was no longer new. Anita stood wondering whether 3 nights ago she'd seen a ghost. When Gina left the store, she shook her head. No way. It's the 21st century. Ghosts don't exist, and they certainly don't drive fancy cars. August, and the flowers at the public gardens had gone crazy in the warmth. They were spreading colours everywhere as if a rainbow had broken and spilled onto the beds. Anita had started cycling across to the gardens and then walking around determined to shed those extra pounds. Jake's visit in June continued to puzzle her. She had no evidence that he had in fact come, seen her, talked to her, and what's more declared his love. After that, there had been nothing, no emails or the old-fashioned letter in the mail, phone call, nothing. She sighed as she sat down on a bench. Looking as lovely as ever, said a voice behind her. I was just wondering if I'd imagined that night in June. She smiled.